Sangat Talks. Sangat Talks. Sangat Talk.
Finally, let us introduce our final speaker of the day, awarded an MBE in 2005 and a Meritorious Service Medal in 2008. He is an accomplished member of the Royal Air Force. Please welcome Mr. Balbir Singh Flora to the stage.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Well, how do you follow that, right? Especially when Harinder's stolen half of my stuff already anyway. Being ex-Air Force, I think. I'm on a downer anyway. I've got the graveyard shift because you've got, I think, refreshments and networking coming up. But I'll try and sort of keep you entertained, and I'll try and make it a little bit interactive with the youngsters as well, just to make sure you're all awake, okay? So you've been warned. So my name's Balbir Singh Flora, and obviously I've always been a case study. Always cut my hair. I'm not a Mrichaka, but why did I join the Air Force? Well, it's all down to me being born in Nairobi in Kenya at Eastleigh. Back in 1959, that used to be the location where, obviously there's an airport now, big massive airport, but at the time it was Royal Air Force Base Eastleigh. It was a little Air Force base pre-Kenyan independence. So as a kid growing up, I used to see planes flying around. My father worked for the railways. We moved to Zambia, and we had an air base just around the corner. So again, I saw planes flying around. So I always had this interest about planes, and I'd be that kid at school doodling on the tables and the books, little planes and little parachutes coming out of them because I've had air-to-air combat and somebody shot somebody else down. So obviously you can imagine my dream was to be a pilot. Or it was definitely heading that way. At the age of 13, we moved to UK. Lived in Southall for about a year and a half, and I'd jump on the number 105 bus at Southall Broadway and go to Heathrow and sit at the top of the terminal watching planes landing and taking off, which my mother couldn't understand, and she'd have a go at me. She said, well, you can see them fly over Southall anyway, but for me it was watching them land and take off and that kind of thing. We moved to the Midlands, to Coventry, so I went to school in Foxford School in Coventry, but I joined the Air Cadets. So that's an option if some of you young people want to experience flying. At the age of 13 onwards, you can join the Air Cadets, which is a youth organisation, and you can learn to fly. So I was fortunate, joined the Air Cadets in Coventry, and I started going down to Gaydon to do gliding. Now, nowadays your mum and dads drive you everywhere. But in my day, that didn't happen. My dad didn't even have a car. Gaydon was 22 miles from where we lived in Coventry in Foleshill. How did I get there? Get on a push bike on a Saturday. I didn't even have a push bike, so I used to borrow my friend's older brother's push bike. So we'd cycle 22 miles to Gaydon. That's where the National Car Museum is now, by the way, if you want to go and have a look. Lots of old cars and stuff there, a lot of film props as well. And used to cycle down there, do a day's gliding, and then cycle back 22 miles. So that was a sort of dedication. I loved gliding. I got my gliding pilot wings. I also went flying in Chipmunks with the Air Cadets, and I wanted to join the Air Force. So I spoke to my mum about it, and guess what the answer was? No, you're not going to war and get killed. So I wanted to join the Air Force, and I thought, right, how am I going to do this? And I could wait till I'm over 18 because you need parental permission to join if you're under 18. But I sort of spoke to my mum and I said, look, I really want to do this. And I wasn't clever enough, by the way, to be a pilot either at the time. Because to be a pilot, you need 5 GCSEs, must have English and maths, minimum grade 4, 5, plus 2 A levels. If you haven't got that, the computer will automatically reject you. Okay? So that's the first thing. I didn't like school either, but make sure you get those grades, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So I thought, right, how am I going to get this? My old man was a bit of an alcoholic. In those days, you needed 2 signatures, and I wanted to get away from what he was doing and get away from that situation. So I waited till the day he was really drunk, and I said, sign this, it's a job application. So I didn't lie. It was a job application. He signed it. My mother did not write or read English, so I got her to sign it. Said it's a job application, including training, which again wasn't a lie. And then I had to wait about 4 months till the date of joining the Air Force. And I did a runner from home. I don't condone that, kids, by the way, unless you're really desperate, okay? But I actually legged it from home, and I rang up my mother that evening, and I said, Mum, I'm not going to be home. And she said, oh, are you stopping at your friend's house or something like that? And I said, no, I've joined the Air Force. So obviously she wasn't a very happy person. It was almost a demand immediately, leave and come back home now, that kind of thing. Wind forward for 6 weeks, and we had our graduation parade. So everybody else is there out of 180 of my intake. And they've all got their parents there. And I'm the only person, the only Sikh with the star who hasn't got anybody there, right? Because my dad didn't drive. Well, he drove, but he didn't have a car. So none of my family were there. But every other parent knew who I was, because when they went home with the intake photo with a big mass of people dressed in this sort of grey blue, and then in those days we had a light blue turban, a light blue the star, which is the same colour as the RAF flag, or slightly darker than this shirt. And when you saw this photo behind a sort of a big hangar door, which is painted green stroke grey, and the people sat in front and standing in front in a big mass, all in that blue-grey, there's this light blue dot sticking out. So everybody, basically, when the kids went on with the photos, went, who's he? Pointing to me, not bothered looking for their son, but who's he? So all these parents wanted to then come and meet me, so I didn't feel sort of that left out. So I graduated, went on to do my trade training, or learn the job, do my professional training, and I trained as a logistics expert, because as I said, back in the day, you did not go to sixth form college to do A-levels unless you had very good O-level grades at school. You went to a technical college or went out to work. This is back in the 70s. So here's a clue. So I joined in back in 1977. A lot of your parents weren't even born then, right? I've been in the Air Force for over 45 years now. And so obviously it's been a good career choice. Finished my phase 2 training, went home and said to my mum, right, I finished my training now, I've got a job, and I'll be working on this space. And again, all I used to get was leave, come back home, leave, come back home. Wind forward, I got married, had kids, and my mother then tried to get my wife to get me to leave the Air Force, but I persevered because I love the job and I love what we do. So anybody in here know why we have an Air Force? Brilliant. And? Humanitarian aid, okay? So we go and help people, we fly humanitarian aid. So even at the moment, right, we're dropping aid over Gaza because you can't land there. When there's a flood, when there's floods and stuff. So when we had a dam busting about 2-3 years ago, up north somewhere, right, RAF helicopters were taking big bags of rubble to block that gap in the dam, to stop the village below getting washed away and stuff like that. So there's a lot of humanitarian aid stuff going on in the background as well. But did you know at least once, twice a week, Russian aircraft come into British airspace, and we launch our fighters to go and intercept them, to keep them out of British airspace, to keep you guys safe while you're sleeping at day, night, that kind of thing. Did you know that sort of stuff goes on? Right? So we have an Air Force there to keep us safe, the country safe. It's our saver. And for that, even with Virgin Airways, you saw the plane and the pilot, and you saw some pictures with other people in the background. Now, if I give you an example that in the Air Force, the pilots or all the people who fly is 10%. So that's the pilots, the people in the back of the passenger planes, the guys who hang out at the helicopters, do all the surveillance, operating all the electronics equipment in the surveillance aircraft and stuff, is 10%. So what do the other 90% do? Yeah? And even out of that 10%, it's only about 2% who are actually pilots. And they don't fly all the time. Some of them stuck behind a desk for about 3 years or 18 months or whatever. So it goes to show you that that pilot job is quite niche. It's like being a Formula One driver or that Premiership football player for Man City or something like that. It's that niche, you know. So for Harinder to make it in to the Air Force to become a pilot is very, very good. And I was having a conversation with Benji somewhere, can't see you now, but about a couple of the young lads there. At the moment, our medical criteria is very, very strict, and it always has been. But some of those medical conditions change because of breakthroughs in medical conditions, and treatment and stuff. So many years ago, if you had laser eye surgery, you could not fly full stop. Now we accept that because laser eye surgery has proved to be successful because you can have it and your eyes are good for a good 10, 15 years, that kind of thing. So the policy changes. So for young people, what the policy is today, don't write it off. When you get older, still have a look because the policy might have changed. So bear that in mind, okay? Same with the educational things. English and maths is very, very important. We do have, out of 60 odd jobs, about 5 jobs you can do without English and maths. But when you get promoted to corporal, which is team leader, we're going to send you to night school to do English and maths at GCSE. Do you like school that much that you want to go back to night school for a year? You do. Would you not rather get that grade now? You know what I mean? So you're at school now, get that grade, because it'll save you time later on. Because you work during the day, and you'll go to night school to get that qualification. But that's only about 5 jobs out of 66, I think there is in total. Yeah? So bear that in mind. That GCSE English and Maths is important because later on, that will help you to get promotion and stuff like that, which means more money in your pocket and things like that. The biggest chunk of jobs we have in the Air Force is engineering. 33% are engineers. So here's some facts. Nationally, they reckon there's going to be about 2 million jobs. There's a massive skills gap shortage, especially cyber communications, aircraft engineering, massive, massive gap. Ladies, you are 52% of the population, but less than 26% in engineering. Yeah. If you're a woman of colour, anybody want to hazard a guess? What percentage? 4. Right? Why is that? Because we've got this mental thing that we must do a job that is nice and clean, tidy, and aspire to be better things. And we associate engineering with being dirty, greasy, because we know mechanics or whatever who fix cars, trucks. Leicester's got the national space industry there, where they build satellites. It's the cleanest environment on the planet. You can't even take a speck of dust into some of those environments, that kind of thing. There's loads of cyber aircraft avionics, which is all the electronics and stuff like that. Think about it. There are a lot of clean engineering jobs, scientific jobs, so, great seeing somebody like you as a role model for the ladies there, to say there are things there you can do rather than the bog standard stereotypical jobs that we all think about, because there's a massive, massive gap. So my journey, I joined as a logistician, as I said. I'm a logistics expert. I spent most of my life working with aviation fuels, petrols, oils, lubricants, and part of that was building fuel dumps in the middle of nowhere, in forests and stuff, and just hiding them, camouflaging them all up and stuff like that, preparing for that Russian invasion in the Cold War days, that kind of thing, building ammunition dumps as well. I've worked in all aspects of RAF logistics, getting the spares to wherever the plane's broken down the other side of the planet, that kind of thing. Worked on operations side. I've been based in the Falklands on top of a radar site and on top of a mountain for 4 months with 32 other people. And it's a job where you've got to be flexible as well. You can't sort of say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going because my mates aren't going. You're there as a professional, and you've got to provide that professional sort of aspect of it. So I was a logistics expert on top of this mountain with a lot of radar engineers and operators. That's it. You've got to get on with it. And part of my job is, or was on that site, was making sure that the helicopter pad's clear, so when he comes in 2-3 times a week to bring our food and stuff in and spares, I've got to make sure that's de-iced. And guess what? That's my job to marshal him in, give him all the hand signals to get him onto that little bit of pad. And that could be on a nice, clear, sunny day to thick cloud. And the cloud is that sort of thick that they actually follow a fence line up the mountain side to get to the top. Yeah, with a helicopter. And then when they get to a certain point, they know I'm waiting there with my sort of wands to wave them in. That kind of thing. To minus 20 odd in the Scandinavian north, freezing my backside off, and we're in tents, but it's all about providing that logistical support. And that situation, you know, there was actually a barn across the road which was centrally heated with cows in and stuff, but we were in a tent outside, and our Land Rovers, vehicles, everything just froze to the ground. You know, at night the wheels were frozen because the ground's wet, and then we had a water butt on the back of a Land Rover trailer, which holds about 460 gallons of water, and that was frozen solid as well. It was that cold. 2, I've been in Al Udeid, which is in Qatar. Big, massive base. The sand is pure white. You can't walk anywhere during the day without sunglasses because literally you're blinded. And 62 degrees with the sun bouncing off the tarmac. But again, we are trained to work in cold environments. We get training to work in hot environments, and you have to do annual training for loads of different things. You know, you actually spend about 3.5 days doing lots of mandatory training on top of your military training and stuff like that. And that's all so you can manage yourself, your health, and your team. So working in the hot environments, for example, we work outside for about 20 minutes in the heat. Then you've got to spend 40 minutes in the shade or somewhere cooler and drink lots of water. But you can't drink too much water either because, as the doctors will tell you, you're flushing all your electrolytes and stuff out of your body, your minerals, so you take supplements as well because you're literally sweating all the time because it's so hot. Yeah. So there's lots of different situations you've been in, but the Air Force has allowed me to do lots of fun stuff as well. I learned to ski, windsurf, dived off cliffs, I played handball for a few years, which is a German game where it's not football, but you have to use your hands and be up in the air when you throw the ball at the goal and all this kind of stuff. I did a lot of long distance running, but I used to specialize in 30 kilometers with a military pack on, carrying about minimum 35 kilos, that kind of thing. But I enjoyed all that fitness side of things, but I'm now 66 nearly. My knees are gone, so I'm piling on the weight because I can't do too much. I was given some advice from my doctor to say, conserve your knees, because otherwise when you have the replacements, you're going to be worse off in time, you know, because if you carry on doing all that, you will wear them out. So I can't do as much physical stuff as I used to in my younger days. Obviously, I met Harinder about 12, 13 years ago. At that time, I was in charge of the logistics at RAF Wittering, managing a team of about 110. And that's the base where we were responsible for refueling all fixed-wing aircraft globally of the RAF. So, for example, today, the RAF were in we've been to Estonia, I think recently, they've just come back, patrolling the NATO's border with our aircraft, but they need to be refueled. So that team, some of the members of my team would have gone over there to set up the fuels, and they've got to refuel the aircraft and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of things going on. We also manage anything that the Air Force needs. So it could be from the smallest thing, which is a nut or a bolt to fix a plane, to a jet engine, to the uniform we wear, the sheet of paper for your photocopier, you name it. We control, the logistics team, we control everything because it's your money, taxpayers' money. You know, so we control everything, make sure it's all efficient and recyclable, cost effective and stuff like that. So for example, if a young man who wants to be an astronaut, you know, if he was in the Air Force and he wants to travel up to do a job up in Scotland or something like that, you can't sort of say, well, right, I need a vehicle, kind of a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini or something. I'm sorry, but you get a Fiat Punto or something like that, or a Skoda Fabia. It's something cost effective because it's, like I said, taxpayers' money. So we're responsible for the spending of that money as well. Okay, so that's my job as well. I did have some aspirations when I, like I said, joined. I wanted to fly. Well, Dick got the glider pilot's wing, flew in Chipmunks. I spent a lot of my life working with helicopters. So I've done a few hundred hours in the back of helicopters, primarily the Chinook, which I think is brilliant. It's a big, heavy helicopter. And, you know, when it's flying, you know when it's coming down the road because it's got that distinct sound as well. Just recently, about a year and a half ago, I flew in and we flew into a school in North London just to inspire young people. And before you ask, can it come here? The problem is it can come in. We did land it at George Dixon when I was in the careers office in Birmingham many years ago, but it creates problems because it's a heavy helicopter. It sets off house alarms, car alarms, everything as it's coming in, right? So we could hear this alarms going off, and getting louder and louder as this helicopter was coming in. And not only that, but you need to have a big enough sports field as well for us to land it safely. So you can't just land it anywhere. Yeah, has a lot of downdraft, which means as it's coming in, the rotors are spinning. It creates a lot of turbulence underneath. Yeah. So I've loved the helicopter side of things. I've worked with fast jets. I've worked with cargo, transport, and training aircraft. And now I'm based at RAF Cranwell, which is the RAF Officer Academy, where Rinder would have gone to do his initial training. And I work for Recruit and Select. So I go around talking to young people about all the different career opportunities we have. So I've mentioned engineering. So they fix all the planes and the equipment. What happens when we break? Who do we need? Young people, come on. Right, we have all the medical jobs, doctors, dentists, nurses, physiotherapists, you name it, right? And although you can join the Air Force, and we provide a lot of the training, we have a lot of apprenticeships in the engineering side and stuff, some of the officer roles, you actually need to be a graduate as well. So at the moment, for those aspiring to be engineers, a new scheme started earlier on this year. We actually pay your university fees and then give you $5,000 a year to do your aeronautical engineering degree or a electronics communications type degree, which is cyber related. And then obviously with that, you have to then join the Air Force and work for us for a minimum number of years to pay that sort of back. So there's that sponsorship. There's also medical. So year two before you start your year two at university, you can get a medical bursary where they will give you a sort of a reasonable amount of money, which I think in year two it's about 18,000. Year three goes up to about 24, and then while you're doing your house training for your med school, to get your NHS qualification, it's about 60 grand a year, right? And you're only working the mandatory hours. You don't have to do overtime like junior doctors and stuff, as you'll vouch. It's hard work to make ends meet, right? And then with that, at year 10, you can go and specialize as well, where we will then allow you to specialize in one of the fields we need. So we always need things like cardiology, the muscular, skeletal, that kind of things, obviously injuries that the military people pick up. And once you specialize, the wage is about 112K a year. So we allow you to go and do all that. That's all part of a package. The other final sort of sponsorship we have is nursing. We have 34 places a year where you come to the University of Central England, which is in Birmingham, stroke the old Perrybar University. And we pay your university fees and then pay you on top of that, starting at 25,200 in the first year while you're doing your degree to then be a nurse in the Air Force. Yeah. So because obviously that's where the shortage is. So we've got to compete with the NHS and everybody else, the Army and the Navy, to sort of get the people in. But other than that, like I said, we've got 22 apprenticeships in a wide ranging of jobs. So if you want to be that fireman or the policeman, if you can't get into the local fire service or police service, think about the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, because we have those police forces and the fire services as well. And once you're in one of those, you can then transfer after having had the training and worked for a few years, get the experience, you can then become the civilian side. It's easier to transition. Okay? So I've had a successful career, and I think that wearing the star has certain obligations. So wearing the star, you've got to make sure you do the job well and you're squeaky clean. And I think that's our obligation. It's definitely been mine, and that's something that my grandfather said. He said, you go into a Gordon and milk, make sure you're there 5 minutes early and leave 5 minutes after, so nobody can say you're a skiver, doing your job properly. So I think that was what we call early mentoring. That's a term now, mentoring, and then there's another new term now, social mobility, right? I ran away from home to join the Air Force to get to have a good career and all that. But now, like I said, that's got a label called social mobility, doing something to be better than what, your situation was back at home. So there are all these terms that come up, but if you actually think about the basics, Sikhi has actually helped me. So just by wearing the star, I've got to make sure I'm squeaky clean, make sure I do all my job 110% and do it well, because then that is noticed by other people. And as this young man mentioned, I've been honoured by, with the Queen's Queen's birthday list in 2005 to get the MBE, and then 2009 got the Queen's New Year's Honours. But all that hard work isn't for me. It's to inspire other young people to say, you can do it. But you've got to do that. You've got to find that job, the niche job, something you enjoy, and you can then go and achieve stuff. So, Manny, you went to the number 10. Did you meet the most famous person there, though? Or the most famous? Larry the Cat. Anybody heard of Larry the Cat? Right, Larry the Cat is the number 10 cat, been there 13 years. Got its own social media account on X, right? Just look up Larry the Cat. I've got a picture of me with Larry the Cat. I've been lucky. I've been to number 10 a few times. I've been to the palace a few times. It was the now King, the then Prince of Wales, who presented me with my MBE. And I was fortunate. He'd only been king 7 days when he became the king a couple of years ago. And I got invited to go and meet him. Things like that. But all that is because of this. If I was a Mona or somebody who'd been doing bad deeds, I wouldn't have got that. So what I'm trying to say to you young people is think about what you do, because every something you do has an action or a consequence or a reaction to it. So if you do good things and you get your name sort of known, then good things happen. Just like you going to, the Bride of Britain. I watched that and I was so proud. Did you meet? I got emotional. Sorry. Did you meet Jacob, the pilot? The little lad who does a lot of charity money, raising. Now, his dad spoke to me and said I could do with a little uniform for him, And me being logistics, I saw that as a challenge and I arranged that for him, And the tailor who provides all the uniforms for the Air Force, I spoke to him and he said, not a problem. I'll do it for you, And then the biggest problem was trying to find the hat that would fit him, for a young lad, but we did it. Never think of anything as a defeat, think of it as a challenge to say, I've got to do this. I didn't do it for personal gain, but he wanted that because he was going to do a particular charity event, but then his mum passed away or was really ill. She got diagnosed with cancer, and then his dad said, look, if we can get this uniform in time, because Jacob wasn't his own son, but if I marry his mum, then I can adopt him afterwards. So we made sure that uniform was there, made, ready for him on time, that kind of thing. So in the military, we teach you to be humble as well, to do lots of charity work and help and do the seva bit. And that's one of our core things, which fits in perfectly with Sikhi, in the first place. So some questions then to the young people, maybe even the older ones. No, I'm going to ask you one first. When do you think the first Sikh joined? Joined the Air Force or started flying? Who said that? Yep. So if you look at the history of flying, the Wright brothers flew in 1903, the first powered flight, which went 200 meters. 1910, the Maharaja Patala bought 3 planes, and learned to fly. But the first Sikh, a guy called Hardat Singh Malik, who was studying at Oxford and graduated in about 1913, I think it was, wanted to join the Air Force and said to him, no, you can't, because you can't have a person of colour giving orders to the Gauris. to the white. So he was turned away. And he actually found out that the French Free Air Force was taking anybody, and his next problem was, there's a war going on, how do I get to France? So he volunteered to drive an ambulance to deliver it to the Western Front, right? Delivered it, and then joined the French Free Air Force. His tutor at Oxford, he then wrote to his tutor at Oxford, I can't remember his name now, who was a friend of General Henderson, who was running the Royal Flying Corps, because the Royal Air Force hadn't been formed yet. And his tutor wrote to the General Henderson and said, what are you doing? Here's a British subject who studied at Oxford and graduated, and you've said no to him. He's gone to the French and they've taken him. So they called him back to England and gave him an honorary commission, and he joined the Royal Flying Corps on the 1st of April, 1917, right? So Sikhs have always been there since the day the Air Force was formed on the 1st of April, 1918. On and off, the Sikhs have been serving somewhere globally. We've had 3 chiefs of the Indian Air Force who've been Sikhs in India. The next one's going to be a Sikh as well. The Malaysian chief of the Air Force is also Sikh. All the star, they all wear the star. So I'm by no means the first. There are others, not many, but there's a few. In the Air Force today, we've got about 54. Anybody want to guess how many women or young ladies, Sikhnis? 14? Not that high. I think it's about 7 or 8. I think, 7, because one's just left recently because she was a doctor in the Air Force, and she's just left. But there is another. So I'll tell you what they do. You've got Mandeep Kaur, who's the Sikh chaplain, so we have a priest representing the Sikhs in the Air Force. We've got Jasminder, she's a doctor. We've got Anjali, physiotherapist. We've got an aircraft engineer, one in administration, she's an HR officer, and one in supply logistics. So 6 girls. So quite a small amount, and I understand a lot of the parents will say, no, girls don't do this and all that. But these are young ladies who actually want to do that, and they've joined the Air Force. They join and they leave, that kind of thing. We've always had about, like I said, a very small number. Even Sikhs in the Air Force, the Star Wale, very, very few out of the 50 plus. We're probably about 7, 8 of us. The numbers are growing slowly because obviously people like me are going out and about discussing this sort of subject, with the Sikh community to sort of promote that you can join. There are challenges. So, for example, you mentioned the beard, going into the respirator testing facility, as it's called, not the gas chamber, because we actually use tear gas, not gases. Okay? So it's the respirator testing facility. Vaseline is not allowed. Right? Okay? Because if you get used to Vaseline and you're using that equipment, then if the enemy used an actual chemical agent, that Vaseline would react with the chemical agent and maybe make the situation worse. So you're not allowed to use any products, compounds or something. We are looking at it because we have got a Defence Sikh network. So I'm on the committee as the RAF representative. We have an elected chair, secretary, deputy and stuff, and we take these challenges on. So the Canadians have come up with a different respirator, which is an all-over hood that ties around your neck. So we've got some of them off them, and we're doing trials with them. There's been various things cited that, you could do this, that, or whatever, but we can't just use anything because it has to be trialed in the correct conditions to make sure our people are safe, so that you can keep your case without having to trim any of your case and wear the equipment to be safe. Because health and safety is more important to us than anything else. So we are looking at that. We have got a Defence Sikh network, provided gutka for all Sikhs, made of a special paper that's actually waterproof. So if you're out in the middle of nowhere, and it starts raining and it gets wet, you can simply wipe it dry, that kind of thing. It will not fall apart, things like that. And like I said, the network supports and takes on challenges for the Sikhs in the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Ministry of Defence, because we've got civil servants as well. Okay, so that's been my journey in the Air Force. You know, like I said, 45 years. Next July, or this July, should I say, because we've turned the year, I retire, age 66, and I'll be the first person from an ethnic minority to get the 3rd bar on my Long Service Good Conduct Medal, which means I've had that 4 times. So quite an achievement, I think. Any questions? Do you have that? I think this young man had a question.
Oh yeah, have you been to RAF Halton?
I have many times. I've been based there as well. Have you been to the museum? Best plane? For me, it's the Lightning that's hanging up like that from the roof. Or the big Vulcan bomber, my 2 favourite planes. Yeah. So, you know, like I said, it's my job to sort of come out to the communities and let people like you see me, because I firmly believe, you know, that if I see you, I can be you. You know, that's a motto we sort of use as well. You know, if you see a Sikh like yourself, you know, and you think, do I have to accommodate myself? Do I have to cut my beard, or, you know, cut my case, or do I have to take my dastar off? That's your choice, you know. You don't have to, because we even provide you with the dastar. You have to tell us which kapra you want, whether you want malmal or, you know, F74 or Rubia, and what length. Gone are the days, you know, when they used to just give you a chunk of material and you had to dye it. When I joined, you used to get white material and you had to dye it. You know, being logistics, I put in a lot of work. So now you actually tell them which material you want and the length. So I wear 6 meters normally, you know, of Rubia. So, you know, we've gone a lot, you know, come a lot further. And if you're really interested in the subject of the stars, through the Air Force, I carried on studying, because I only left school with a few GCSEs or CSEs, as they were called in those days. I did a degree in logistics management through the Air Force. And for my paper, I actually wrote about, you know, my topic was, what are the logistical implications of recruiting ethnic minorities into the Royal Air Force? A long title. But the case study was a Sikh dastar or a turban. You know, what are, and in that, you know, I talked about why we wear the dastar, all our history, and all the military history side of things, you know, and my paper was huge, because you only allowed 15,000 words, and I had to take a big chunk out and make it into an annex, as you will understand, you know. So I had to then keep referring to the annex when I was talking about bits, because it was so, the topic is so big, you know. So, you know, there is a good reason why we wear the star. It gives us a unique identity, and I think we should be proud of that. Thank you very much.